So my journey began when I was a child. I grew up in church. Thankfully I had great parents. We went to church almost every Sunday. My mom was very involved. She was a youth pastor at one point and church secretary, all kinds of things. So we were always in church. Growing up, that was just what we did. That was who we were. We went to church. We loved God. And then, as I grew up, things began to change in my teenage years. I still loved the Lord and saved at an early age, baptized with the Holy Ghost at an early age. I even taught and preached at an early age. But then as I got a little bit older, it seemed like rejection set in. Things changed in my life through various life circumstances. And I found myself broken. Found myself not really wanting to go to church anymore, trying to search for something to fill that void. And I began as a teenager to reach out and do different things, as any teenager does. I strayed away from the Lord in my teenage years and even into my early 20s. I just really kind of ran from the Lord. Still going to church every now and then, still believing, that I was saved and that I was good, but still searching for something to fill this gigantic void on the inside. So, one thing led to another, and through rejection and pain, I found myself doing things that I wasn't proud of. I hurt a lot of people along the way. I haven't always been this version of me. Looking back on my life, I realize how many people I hurt through poor choices and bad decisions. And through rejection and pain, one thing led to another, and I began to do all kinds of things that were against what the church world would say I should be. I began to act in ways that I'm not proud of. And I started, drinking a little bit here and there. I began to watch videos here and there, pornography and all kinds of crazy stuff. And the whole time, I was trying to fill a void in my life. The entire time I was grappling and trying to wrestle with who I really was. I didn't know who I was. Part of me believed that the hidden part of me was the real me. The part of me that would use and abuse girls, try to get girls to go on dates, not even interested in relationships, and the part of me that would drink and party and smoke marijuana and all those things. That part of me, when I would be around church people or when I would go to church, that part of me I would hide away. And it seemed like, I began to play this role of duality. I began to almost have split personalities, to where I could camouflage in the church world. I could camouflage and be around Christians and be that good little boy, but then in secret, in private, I had this separate life that nobody really knew who I was or what I was doing, except for a handful of people. So that, to me, was the greatest thing I had to overcome. It was the dualism, what I call the dualism. And one way here, but another way here. And the whole time I was in that kind of lifestyle, I thought that the part of me that I was hiding away, that I wouldn't let anybody see, I thought that was the real me. and that one day that would eventually catch up to me. And one day my Christian friends or the church or whoever would find out that, oh, you're not as good as you really think you are. Oh, you're not who you say you are. And that happened for years and years throughout my life, even leading up to some of my teenage years. You know, I battled this. I've battled this my whole life, this duality. Up until about 5 or 6 years ago, I battled this duality inside of me of wanting to be godly and wanting to be somebody who loves God and loves people and helps people, but then the whole time this nagging, this longing in me to do wrong, to do awful things, trying to fill this void. And it wasn't until 5 or 6 years ago that I realized that that hidden part of me, that wasn't the real me. I tried my best to hide it away. I tried my best to fit in whatever circle of friends I was with that day. I would try to fit in, and I would act the way they acted, and then I would go to church and act this way, and then it was exhausting. And then I began to surrender my life, truly surrender my life to God. Me and my wife, we got pregnant with our first daughter out of wedlock. Adeline, she changed our life. She changed my life. And at first it was scary. At first we didn't know what we would do, or if we would even make it, how we would raise a child. All of these thoughts kind of went through our heads. But then I realized something. I realized that I was about to be a father. I realized that I needed to quit playing two roles. I needed to quit trying to be this way and that way. I needed to find out who I really was. There was a part of me in my early 20s where I almost left the church world completely, because I thought, if I'm this way in secret, then that must be who I am. This loving God thing, this trying to love God and trying to do the right thing, it's not working for me. Maybe it's working for other people. Yeah, I didn't know. Maybe they can be that way, but for me, I knew that I had tried for years and years to be that person, and it seemed like the more I tried to be that person, the more this hidden life would almost it would overtake me. So I left the church world for a while. I said, you know what? At least I'll be authentic. At least in doing this, living this way, I'll be authentic. At least now I'm not trying to play this hypocrite role, and at least going to church on Sunday and going and living in the world the rest of the week is what Christians like to call that. So at least now I can be authentically me. So I lived in that way. You know, there was times, without having to go into too much detail, but there was times that I would literally hate myself to the point that I couldn't look in a mirror. There were times in my running from who I actually was, trying to find the real me, that I would end up so drunk that I didn't remember what happened that night. There were times where I found myself at strip joints. I remember this one time, I found myself at a strip joint on New Year's Eve. I had spent every New Year's Eve with family or maybe even at church sometimes. And this one New Year's, I remember sitting alone, bringing in the new year at a strip joint, drunk out of my mind. I don't remember driving home. And the whole time, in the middle of that, nothing would fill me. It would scratch the itch for a little while. It would almost make it feel better while I was doing whatever it was. But then the next morning when the high would wear off, or when the drunkenness would wear off, that void was still there. And it almost felt like it actually had grown. So, flash forward a few years, me and my wife, we get pregnant with our first daughter. And I said, you know what? I'm going to give God everything. I'm going to surrender. I'm going to surrender to God. I'm going to do my best to live the way He wants me to. And that was the beginning point of finding out who I really am. That was the beginning of the journey. But even in that, I was still off base a little bit. So I surrendered to the Lord and I said, God, I give you everything. I want to live right. I want to live how you want me to live. So I started studying the scriptures for myself. I wasn't about trying to go to church and have the preacher or somebody else tell me how to live. I wanted to know for myself who God was and who I was. I wanted to know for me what this thing is actually supposed to look like. So I got hungry for who God was and what He thought about me. And the God that I found in the middle of that searching wasn't like the God that I found when I was 7 or 8 inside of the church world. He wasn't a religious judge sitting behind the courtroom seat with a gavel waiting to banish me to hell. He wasn't a God that was distant, 1,000 million light years away in some far off distant heaven, somehow watching over the world and everything that happens, and every time I messed up, He would cross His arms and distance Himself from me until I got it right. No, the God that I found wasn't like that at all. The God that I found is love. He doesn't just love me as a verb. He is love. That's who He is. He can be nothing other than love. The God that I found cares. He cares about every single thing in my life. And these aren't realizations that came to me in a moment of surrender. These are realizations that has taken me years to find. But in that moment of surrender, I'll never forget, I was supposed to be chaperoning a youth event. I came back to the Lord, and my wife was pregnant. I think we just had our first daughter, and just had gotten married, freshly married, and I was supposed to be a chaperone on a youth event. And I remember going to this certain event, and in that event, the Lord began to deal with me with still some of this hiddenness. Some of the hidden parts of me tried to come back. Even in my full surrender, even in my best surrender, some of these hidden parts of me tried to come back, and I was starting to watch pornography again, and I was using my phone to hurt my wife in our relationship behind her back. And I'll never forget, in this conference that we were at, during an altar call, I ran up on the stage because I was so tired of the dualism. I was so tired of the hiding that was trying to come back, even after fully surrendering. And I ran up on stage in the middle of an altar call, scooted past these 2 or 3 security guards that were supposed to be guarding the stage. I have no clue how I even got up there. And they had a hammer laying on the stage for people to smash their phones if they were dealing with some of this sexual sin. And I didn't answer the first altar call, but the hammer still laid there throughout the rest of the service. And I remember at the end, I ran up past these security guards, and I couldn't do anything but grab the hammer. And I threw my smartphone on the ground in a moment of surrender, and I smashed the fire out of that cell phone as hard as I could with that hammer until it was nothing but pieces. And when I did that, there was something in me that broke. Because I was saying to the Lord, there's still this hidden part of me that I need help with. And after I smashed my phone, I laid face first on the altar in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people and began to encounter the Lord in a real way. He began to show me things and how He really was, how He cared for me, how He loved me. I got up from that moment. I looked down at my phone and I thought, man, what did I just do? But I also felt free. It was a freedom that I had never felt in my life. It was like I could have walked on clouds. I could have floated out of that room, it felt like, because there was no longer this tension, this weight over my head, this black cloud over my head. It just wasn't there anymore. Something in that moment had shifted. Something in my rawness and realness to the Lord had broken that duality in me. So one thing led to another. I began to open up to my wife and those close to me, and it was a long journey. It was a long process. It wasn't easy. It wasn't just in a moment everything was better. In a moment I felt free. But there was a process after that. And then a few years go by and I began to minister again. I began to teach and preach again. And I thought I was doing really good. And I was helping people and seeing people come to encounter the Lord, but there was still a missing piece. My viewpoint of God was still off. I viewed the act of smashing my phone as my salvation. I viewed the act of my prayer, the act of my words. I saw that as my salvation. And I thought as long as I repented enough, or the church world calls it repentance, what I really mean when I say that word is, as long as I asked for forgiveness enough, as long as I told the Lord about every little detail of my life, and I told Him I was sorry, and I told Him I was wrong, and I asked Him to forgive me, as long as I continually did that about every little thing, then I was good with God, and this dualism wouldn't come back. But I was wrong. I was wrong in that. Because I was still seeing God based off of my works, based off of my prayers, based off of my surrender, based off of my sacrifice. I was almost leaving Jesus out of the equation. So a couple years go by and I'm ministering and I'm doing a lot better and helping people and loving my wife and loving the Lord. And then all of a sudden, this small dualism starts to slip up again, sneak up on me again, if you would say. And little by little, I began to hide it away. Because I thought, I'm somebody in the church now. I have a position now. I can't let people see this part of me. I can't even act like it's there. So little by little, I began to slip and hide parts of me away from God and from those around me. And ultimately it led to adultery. And I hid that away from God and from my wife for a long time. But it ate at me from the inside out. Until one day I realized that I was back in the same position that I had started years before. I was back in this dualism, trying to be one way in front of a certain group of people, trying to be another way in front of others. So I called my pastor at the time, and I opened up to him, and I opened up to my wife. And again, none of this looked like a holy moment. None of this looked like bright and shining and glittery, and it wasn't like that. It was ugly. It was raw. It was hard. But I was determined. I was determined to be who God wanted me to be. And I was determined that no matter what dualism came, no matter if I lost my position in the church, no matter if I never did ministry again, I just wanted to be real. I wanted to be authentic. I didn't want to be the hypocrite. I didn't want to be the Christian that everybody calls the hypocrite. I didn't want to be that guy. And I didn't care what it cost me. So I opened up to everybody around me, and I did. I surrendered my position in the church at that point, and I began to heal. I began to heal my marriage. I began to heal myself. And it wasn't easy, because then I had to face what I would say is the toughest thing we ever have to face. Then I had to face my brokenness. Then I faced my brokenness. And I handed the Lord those pieces, little by little. There was a piece here this day, and then what I began to do was I began to be intentional about spending time alone with God. I began to spend time alone with Him and asking Him to process me, asking Him to make me into who He's seen me, who He created me to be, show me who He really was. And it was in this process that I began to discover that He is love. He can be nothing other than love. He is good, and He can be nothing other than good. He actually cannot reject us. The nature of God cannot reject you. It's who He is. He doesn't know how to do rejection. He doesn't know how to do abandonment. The rejection that I walked through, and the pain and the struggling that I walked through, it was a reality of my own decisions. It was a reality of others' decisions to hurt me, to wound me. It was a reality of my own decisions. It wasn't God putting that on me. It wasn't God punishing me. It wasn't God saying, here, you need this test and this trial. What do you mean? Why would a loving father make his kids go through hell on earth to teach them a lesson? I wouldn't do that to my son. And if I wouldn't do that to my son, but God would to his, then we're saying we're better parents than God. But that's not the case. Your brokenness, your hurting, is not a result of God punishing you. It's not a result of God being mad at you. It's a result of your own decisions or others' decisions. And the result of those decisions become hurt and heartache and brokenness. Look, we're all broken. We're all broken. There is not a single person living today that is not broken or experienced a level of brokenness. But it's in that rejection and it's in that brokenness that we're supposed to take those pieces to a loving Father who is God. But we don't take those pieces to God because we have either thought wrong or been taught wrong about who He is. If He's an angry judge and He's distant then why would we ever want to approach him with our problems? I didn't want to approach God with my problems because I thought I should be over this by now. I should be doing better by now. I should be free from this by now. I didn't want to approach God with my issues because I thought that if I showed him my issues, then I thought he would say, yeah, you're forgiven. Come on, can't you get it together yet? Haven't you learned yet? But I found out through intimate relationship with him, that's not who he is. I had a wrong perspective of who God was. And my wrong perspective of who God was kept me broken. It kept me in this dualism. Now on the other side of this, sitting here talking to you today, my marriage is healed. My marriage is in a place that I only dreamed of it being. I wasn't even sure it could ever get there. But the relationship with me and my wife is in a place that it's never been, and it's amazing, and it's full of love, and it's full of communication. My kids have a dad at home. You know, you walk through something like that, the majority of those type of things end in divorce. The majority of people who have lived the life that I've lived end up alone and divorced, and their kids only get to see them on weekends. But because God was willing, not because I was willing, but because God was willing to take my brokenness and make it into something beautiful. I can sit here and tell you my story. I can sit here and tell you that I'm whole. I'm not broken anymore. But I will not sit here and tell you that I am flawless in my actions. I will not sit here and tell you that I am mistake-free, because I make mistakes still every day. But what I don't do is I don't allow those mistakes to define who I am or how God sees me. Let me ask you a question that God asked me. Where was God on your worst day? Think back to the day, maybe it's today watching this video, but think back to the day of the loneliest, nastiest, broken day you've ever had. The most disgusting you've ever felt, the most hatred you've ever felt towards yourself. I think we all have kind of a time frame in our life, if not a certain day, that we can look back on and say, this was my brokenness day. This was my worst day. This was the time I felt the lowest. Think back to that day. Now let me ask you a question. Where was God? And how did he feel towards you? I can answer the question truthfully. Before I found out who he really was, I thought that on that day, God was nowhere near me. I thought that because of my actions, he couldn't get close. I thought on that day, there was no way he could love me. But watch this. On your worst day, God loves you the most he could ever love you. He loves you as if you had just won 3 million souls to Jesus for the kingdom on your worst day. And not only that does he love you, in the middle of it, but He's actually right there with you, waiting for you just to turn to Him and embrace a Father's love. He was with you on the day that you felt the most broken, the most nasty. He was with you that day, and His love for you was no less on that day than it is right now. Because the Father's love towards you, God's love towards you, is not dependent on your works. It's not dependent on how good you are. It's not dependent on being mistake-free. His love for you is full. The most love He can have, which is beyond our imaginations. That's how much love He loves you with. From start to finish, His love never changes for you. And you never have to walk alone because He's always right there with you. He's always right there with you. He's never going to give up on you. My biggest issue was that I seen God wrong and that I seen myself wrong. I seen myself as broken. I seen myself as flawed. I seen myself as unworthy, as unlovable. I thought there was no way God could love me. I mean, look at everything I've done. Look at who I've become. How could God love something like that? But I was so wrong. I want to read something to you as I finish up. It's Colossians chapter 3. It says, Christ's resurrection is your resurrection too. This is why we are to yearn for all that is above. For that's where Christ sits enthroned at the place of all power, honor, and authority. Yes, feast on all the treasures of the heavenly realm. Fill your thoughts with heavenly realities and not with the distraction of this natural realm. Your crucifixion with Jesus has severed the tie to this life, and now your true life is hidden away in God in Christ. As Christ Himself is seen for who He really is, who you really are will also be revealed. For you are now one with Him, Jesus, in His glory. You see, the whole time I was broken, the whole time I thought I was unlovable, I was in a false reality. I was in a delusion. My sin had caused me to become delusional about who God was, about how He cared for me, about who I was. My sin had caused me to become delusional. But the whole time, in the middle of that, my real life, the real me that I was searching so hard for, in the middle of that, the real me was hidden away with Jesus, in Jesus. My true reality was I was one with Jesus. And because I was one with Jesus, the Father seen me as flawless. He sees me as Jesus is, so the Father sees me. And He sees you that way. In the middle of your brokenness, in the middle of your heartache, in the middle of your worst day, He sees you and loves you as much as He does Jesus. Jesus changed the whole thing. I had a religion. I didn't have a father. I had a religion. I had a religion that was void of Jesus. And I think the majority, or many, I should say many, throughout the United States church, I think many grew up with this type of religion. We talk about Jesus, but our life is void of Him. Because of Jesus, I am seated with God in heavenly places, and that becomes my reality. Because of Jesus, the Father's love for me is beyond measure, even in the middle of my brokenness. So what happened was the Father took me on a journey, and it was not an easy journey. It wasn't rainbows and butterflies. It was hard. It wasn't easy. But the Father, the whole time, the Father was trying to get me to realize who I am in Jesus, how He sees me, who He is. That's what we're all on. We're all on a journey. We're all on a journey. No matter if you're watching this and you don't even think God's real, you're still on a journey. We're all on this journey of life, trying to find out, why am I here? What's my purpose? And who am I? That's the big one. When you find out who you really are, then at that point, you can build on a foundation. But until then, you'll still see Him as distant. You'll still see Him as disappointed in you. But He's not. He's not. I hope I've given you a peek into my life today to show you that I am not perfect, that I have made so many mistakes. I have hurt so many people. But this is my story. And God, His love was all throughout my story. My story is a story of the scandalous, reckless love of God chasing me in the middle of my delusion, chasing me in the middle of my brokenness. His love never stopped coming after me. And His love will never stop coming after you. He loves you. No matter what you did an hour ago, no matter who you think you are, He loves you and He sees you in Jesus. So yes, this is my story. And through Jesus, God sees me flawed.